What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down, take a bunch of videos that tell one story, and I put those videos together into one big video. Now, today's full story video is going to be over the Evolutionary War. This was one of the first few events Marvel did back in the 1980s, and they did it through all the different annuals at that time. Now, the main idea of the Evolutionary War was to use a character known as the High Evolutionary. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, his main goal in this storyline is to advance the human race, to make the human race become gods across the universe. Now, the only reason why he is trying to reach that goal because many years ago, he was able to create a counter Earth on the other side of the sun, except that counter Earth was actually taken away from him by the Beyonders. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, when he went out of his way to confront the Beyonders, he realized they were god-like beings, and he was then hoping to turn the human race into them, god-like beings. And so this entire event is him trying to pull off different schemes to help advance the human race. But the problem is you have different heroes standing in his way. Spider-Man, X-Factor, X-Men, New Mutants, Fantastic Four, the list goes on. There are 11 chapters in this one particular event. But I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. Well, here we go. Hey there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. This is the channel where we sit down and cover different comic book stories from different comic book companies. We're going to cover the Evolutionary War. This was the first crossover Marvel did in their annuals. 11 different annuals were used to tell this story about the High Evolutionary trying his best to save the human race and make sure it evolves in a way that he imagines. This is all coming from the idea that he believes that the human race is doomed when it comes to our evolution path, and soon we will reach an end where we are no longer around. His real name is Dr. Herbert Edgar Wenham, was a brilliant scientist, an Oxford scientist, and a cosmic philosopher who wanted to understand the complexities of evolution. It all started with a desire to explore the mysteries of human DNA. Really, it wasn't just human genetics he played around with, but also other kinds of genetics. He was also studying the secrets of the universe as well. But by this point, his main goal is just human evolution because of the Beyonders. See, around his time in Marvel Comics, the High Evolutionary was able to create a counter Earth on the other side of the sun, on the same orbit pattern of Earth's, except it was taken by some people who worked for the Beyonders. And when he went to go get it back from them, well, he saw how powerful and advanced they were compared to him and sent him down a spiral of despair, and he decided to take his own life, which he did. But when we jump into the Evolutionary War, he was alive again, or technically never did die, and back to trying to make sure that humans evolved the correct way in his mind, but to hopefully rival the Beyonders down the road. And so he set in motion different plans across the world. Each annual is really more of a set of different characters dealing with his crazy plans of him trying to advance the human race. Now, how we are going to do this is that we're going to use each video to cover just one chapter of the Evolutionary War. And the reason why I'm doing it like this, because once we are able to cover all the different X-Men chapters in this crossover, we'll be able to get back on track into covering more X-Men books that are leading into X-Men Inferno, the next crossover that we are going to cover. But at the same time, we'll still be able to continue to cover the Evolutionary War with the other chapters once we're done with the X-Men chapters. And so we'll have two different things happening on the channel, but the people who want to know more about the High Evolutionary and the Evolutionary War will get those videos. And the ones who are here just for the X-Men videos will also get their videos as well, to keep the peace on both sides. And so as we dive into today's storyline, we pick up with the Purifiers. Now, when it comes to the Purifiers, these are not the same ones that most people know of when they read X-Men comics. Instead, this is another group of characters with the same name, but they work for the High Evolutionary. Now, when it comes to the Purifiers, we do pick up with them in the tunnels deep underneath the earth, because they're trying to sterilize the different Moloids who live in those tunnels. And the only reason why they are doing this is because when it came to the High Evolutionary, he looked at this particular race of people and said, you know what? This race is doomed to fail. Their evolutionary path is going to lead into a dead end. There's no point for them to be around anymore on the planet Earth. So why not go ahead and go out of our way to kill them off? Except while you have the Purifiers trying to achieve that goal to get rid of this race, they have no idea that one of them is technically a mutant that has the ability of a telepath. And as soon as you have one of the Purifiers harm that telepath, he is able to send out a telepathic scream across the world. And you have other people who are also psychics hear that scream. You are talking about Emma Frost, Rachel Summers, Franklin Richards, Psylocke, and other characters. Heck, even the High Evolutionary himself as well feels and hears this psychic scream. But the one character we have to focus on is Jean Grey, because remember, around this point, she had just recently came back to life after supposedly dying in the Dark Phoenix saga. But here's the thing, when she came back to life, she told us, the readers, that she had lost one of her abilities, and that was the ability of being a telepath. Now, she still had telekinesis, but no longer had the ability to be a telepath. And so this is the first time that she was able to connect with someone else with her mind, except now she realized that somebody is really in danger. But when she heard that scream in her mind, her and X-Factor were trying to rebuild the Empire State Building after Apocalypse had wrecked most of New York. And so in the middle of the rebuild, she passes out because of that scream. Now, she is saved by her fellow members, and you do have our team go back to their ship to figure out what in the world is going on. We jump over to Caliban, who is currently with Apocalypse. Now, usually when it comes to Caliban, he has the ability to detect other mutants who are nearby him. But thanks to that psychic scream, he was able to pick up on it, tell Apocalypse, and Apocalypse was able to locate the original point of that scream. And he finds out where it came from, and he's now watching the Purifiers kill off the Moloids. Now, when it comes to Apocalypse, he knows the Purifiers work for the High Evolutionary. Except when it comes to Apocalypse, the High Evolutionary, his belief does not match up with Apocalypse's belief. And I'll explain why down the road in this video. But now this is Apocalypse saying, you know what? It's time for me to have a conversation with the High Evolutionary. We have to jump back over to the Purifiers, who are trying to get rid of the Moloids. But the problem is every single time they attack the mutant Moiloid, he is able to control the minds of the others to make them feel what he feels, but to also attack when he wants to attack. And so earlier, when he got hurt, they all felt that pain. They all wanted to attack the Purifiers. But once he calmed down, the others had also calmed down. Except, again, when they continue the process of trying to sterilize this group, once they go after the mutant Moiloid, he begins to make the others wanting to attack the Purifiers. They're having a hard time controlling this situation. And so when we jump back over to X Factor, they were able to pinpoint where that screen came from thanks to Jean Grey being able to begin the process of regaining the ability of being a telepath. And so you have our heroes being able to go into the tunnels of the Moiloids, except when they arrive, they find a bunch of dead bodies of Moiloids. And this shows the Purifiers have been working, but our heroes have not arrived at the big point of the scene yet, except you didn't have more Moiloids begin to attack X Factor, because these Moiloids are also being controlled by the mutant one. And when he sees X Factor, he believes that they are with the Purifiers, and they are also there to get rid of them as well. And this leads into Apocalypse paying the High Evolutionary a visit. Now, this visit is really important because this is Apocalypse saying, hey man, listen, I feel like you're doing the wrong thing here when it comes to the evolution of the human race. Because when it comes to Apocalypse, he's really big in the idea of survival of the fittest. If you are weak, you deserve to die. But if you are strong, you deserve to live. And that's really important because to Apocalypse, that's the best way to see if the human race, the mutant race, is able to evolve to become something better than what they were before. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he agrees with Apocalypse, the idea that the humans and the mutants must evolve, except he has some problems with Apocalypse's plan. You see, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he feels like Apocalypse's plan takes too long because Apocalypse has been around for a very long time. But that's the problem right there. You've been going at this idea of survival of the fittest as a way to make the human race stronger for a very long time. And unfortunately, we haven't gotten that far. I've seen what's out there in the universe. I saw the Beyonders, and we have so much potential to reach that point. But the problem is we're having a hard time to reaching that point. And that's why I say, why wait that long when I'm here now and have the ability to help us reach that point? But for me to be able to reach that point, I have to kill off different kinds of races on Earth. And so that's when you have Apocalypse say, but that's your problem. See, you're trying to rush things and you don't realize when you rush things, you're going to mess up here and there even more than I have over time. You see, when it comes to Apocalypse, he's trying to tell the High Evolutionary, but you're missing the point here. See, here you are right now trying to get rid of the Moiloids because you believe that they have reached the end of their evolution path, but that is where you are wrong. See, you didn't realize that one of them is a mutant, and that right there is an evolution. Because now there is a possibility that down the road we can have more and more mutants down there. And then there's a possibility that even they can evolve into something even greater, possibly godlike characters down the road. But here you are right now trying to cut off that chance of them to reach that point. And so you have Apocalypse grab the High Evolutionary and take him down to where the battle's happening between X Factor, the Moiloids, and also the Purifiers. Now, something I do want to mention when it comes to the Moiloids, see, they don't usually have the ability to communicate like we do. See, we use words, but for them, they have to use sounds. They have to use symbols as a way to communicate with one another. And that is another reason why when it comes to the High Evolutionary, when he looks at them, he says, yeah, they're a failure. You're going to tell me over time, this race right here was not able to find a way to better communicate with one another besides using sounds and symbols? That is a complete failure. But on top of that, it seems like over time, they have gotten worse. They lost more and more intelligence as they got older and older. Either way, it's time for them to go. Now, we jump back over to X Factor, and you have Jean Grey being able to communicate with one of the Moiloids that is a mutant. And once she's able to talk to him and calm him down, the others are also able to calm down as well. And this is a huge achievement. But then Jean Grey learns what's happening right here in these tunnels. The idea of the Purifiers going out of their way to try to kill off this race. And so you have X Factor say, hey, you know what? We're here now. Why not go out of our way to help you out to protect your home? And so you have X Factor being able to help out the Moiloids to fight against the Purifiers. Now, there are a few things happening when it comes to this battle, but the one thing I do want to focus on is Apocalypse, who is currently forcing the High Evolutionary to watch this battle. He said, look, this is your fault right here, or would have been your fault if they had failed. Because look right now, you believe the Moiloids were a weak race of people that deserve to be killed off because you believe that they have reached the end of their evolutionary path. But they haven't though. You see, look at them right now. That one right there, he is a mutant. He has shown that he is strong enough to lead the others to help X Factor to fight against your Purifiers. And that right there shows they're not done evolving yet. And sooner or later, there is a possibility that more mutants could be born into this actual race. And then they can still continue to evolve. We have no idea what could else happen to them down the road. Now, when it comes to that mutant Moiloid, he's also able to connect his mind to the members of X Factor like beasts. And over time, he begins to learn how to speak. And that is huge because now he has the ability to possibly teach the other Moiloids how to speak as well. You see, they are evolving. And that is what Apocalypse wants the High Evolutionary to understand. You try to rush things and you almost destroyed an entire race. And that is your downfall right there. But either way, you have Apocalypse say, I want you to realize what happened here. See, you came into these tunnels with a game plan to get rid of them, and they were able to overcome that. Look at that. It's kind of like survival of the fittest. Your army against theirs, and they were able to uprise against your army, and you failed. So guess what happened here? The strong survived, and the weak failed off and died. Bam, who won? Now you do have our heroes being able to get rid of the Purifiers. And of course, you have the High Evolutionary call them back. And he realized that there is a possibility that Apocalypse is right. But when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he's not done yet. Because like I said earlier, when it came to the entire event, 11 different annuals were used for this one crossover, and each annual tells a different story of how the High Evolutionary has different plans going on across the world to hopefully help the human race evolve into what he believes could go up against the Beyonders. But this is where So we do pick up with the Punisher in Bogota. Now when it comes to Bogota, it's located in Colombia. And the reason why the Punisher is there because he's going after a certain drug lord who has a huge drug empire in that area. His name is El Cayman. Now when it comes to the Punisher, that is his only goal here, is to take out the drug lord and then move on to his next target. Except when he arrives, he realized the country is on fire. fire. There is some kind of attack happening in this area, and he has no idea what in the world is going on. Now, when he looks over, he does see a young couple trying their best to get away from somebody, but he has no idea who. Unfortunately, the young couple is gunned down. Really, the boy of the couple is gunned down. The lady is able to survive only because of the Punisher being there. And then we are introduced to the Eliminators. Now, the Eliminators are very similar to the Purifiers in some ways. For example, they both work for the High Evolutionary as he is trying to help improve the human race. And their main goal is to make sure no obstacles stand in his way. And currently, the current obstacle in his way is drugs. And so they're here to go after El Cayman as well, like the Punisher. The only difference is that they're also going after people who may have a connection to El Cayman in different ways. So for example, if you have used his drugs, you have to die. If you have sold his drugs, you have to die. And so when it comes to El Cayman, he's not there the moment, but they're killing off anybody who may have a connection to him. And then after that, they'll go after him. And so you do have the Punisher step in to protect the innocent people who are being killed off because of this war. Now, once you have the Punisher take out a group of Eliminators, he realized he has no choice but to retreat. One, he's low on ammo, and two, because another group is on their way. And that is when we learn that Lucinda, the woman he saved earlier, is the daughter of El Cayman. And she says, "Come with me, my father has a villa that we can hide at for the moment until we know what is our next move." Now, once you have the Punisher and Lucinda arrive at her father's villa, you then have the father realize the Punisher may not be with the Eliminators, but he's also there to kill off El Cayman, because he realized this man does not look like he belongs in our country. But also when he walks in, he says, "Listen, your daughter brought me here to help protect you and her both, but she hasn't realized I'm here to convince you to leave the drugs behind and hopefully have a new life in somewhere else." Now, that's the Punisher saying, "I'm not here to convince you, I'm here to kill you, and your new life is going to be heaven or hell. Who knows?" Now, when it comes to El Cayman, he really tries his best to paint a picture in a way where he's not really a bad guy. He uses the money that he had made over time with his drug operation to help out villages around the area. And he says, "Look, that village right there, they almost had no resources at all. But thanks to me, they have received a whole lot more resources to stay alive. And again, all because of me." Now, their conversation is cut short because you do have more Eliminators appear and try their best to kill off Punisher, but also kill off El Cayman. Really, their main goal is El Cayman. Now, we kind of find out that El Cayman has a secret passageway to another house down the hill, and there is a helicopter that can take them somewhere else that has more powerful weapons that can help the Punisher take down the Eliminators. Now, after they are able to reach that other house in the helicopter, they head over to this hidden area that El Cayman has. Inside is an aquarium, but also inside is a bunch of different kinds of weapons, powerful weapons that can help the Punisher take down the Eliminators. And the Punisher, he's in love with these weapons, but at the same time, Homeboy is still plotting to kill off El Cayman to make sure that he does die for the drugs that he had produced in this area. But either way, while you have the two men talking to one another about the idea of using these weapons on the Eliminators, they get a call that there's an aircraft nearby that's about to attack this area. We already know that aircraft belongs to the Eliminators. And so that leads into the Punisher fighting against the Eliminators. And really, this battle does go on for a few pages. Really, it's more the Punisher being the Punisher, making sure that no one survives when it comes to this particular battle. Now, once you have the Punisher being able to take out every single one of the Eliminators except one so that he is able to gather more information, you do have that one guy tell the Punisher the only reason why they are there is because they are working for the High Evolutionary. But on top of that, they tell him the goal of the High Evolutionary, the idea of trying to improve the human race. Now, the Punisher, he has no idea what all this means, but he does know one thing: this last surviving member of the Eliminators has to go, and he kills him off. But now his goal is to go after El Cayman. It was the original reason of why he was here for. But the Punisher has a problem here. The Punisher only has 2 bullets left. El Cayman has a full clip left. And so this is not really a fair battle for the Punisher, except the Punisher realizes or remembers that they are inside a aquarium. And so when it comes to the Punisher, he takes one of those bullets to shoot the glass of the aquarium to release the crocodile on El Cayman. And that crocodile gets a nice big dinner for the night. Now Lucinda, she's very upset with the Punisher for what he has done to her father. But he says, your dad was not a saint. Your dad was really an evil man. Look at what he did to your city, to the people around you. Like, you're really going to sit here and grieve for a man who has only done harm to the people nearby. And once she also realized that, she agrees to leave with the Punisher, and they walk into the jungle. Into today's video, we do pick up with the Eternals. Now, before we dive into their conversation with the High Evolutionary, I kind of want to remind you guys a couple things about them that is going to be important for later chapters in today's video. So when it came to the Eternals, we already know that they were created by the Celestials, and they were created hundreds and thousands years ago. But they were also created alongside with another group, and that would be the Deviants. Now, when it comes to the Deviants, unfortunately, they are looked at as the failures when it comes to genetics. Because here's the thing. Every single deviant is going to reach a point where they are going to completely lose their minds and begin to go crazy on a rampage, attacking their own people, but also other people around them as well. And most of the time, the Eternals have to step in and take care of those deviants. And that is why they're known as genetic failures. And so the Eternals are not known like that. They are known as a huge success when it comes to the Celestials. And so when it comes to the High Evolutionary, when he goes out of his way to meet with the Eternals, he said, listen, my goal is to advance the human race, and your goal is to protect the human race. Well, our goals align with one another. So why not try to help each other out to reach both of our goals? I want to also protect the human race, and you want to see us advance as well. So let's work together. And they agree. Except when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he says, before we are able to do anything at all, I need you guys to find the Silver Surfer, because we need to map his genetics. Now we do jump over to the Silver Surfer, and around this time he was on his way back to Earth because he was spending some time with Nova, who had also just recently became a Herald of Galactus. And him and Nova, well, they had a thing going on around this time in Marvel Comics. Homeboy was trying to get some love, but either way, they say their goodbyes because he's heading back to Earth and she has to return back to Galactus. Now, on his way back to Earth, and when he arrives to Earth, he realized something is happening to the Earth. Now, not the actual planet, but the radiation rings around the planet. And then out of nowhere, you have the return of the Super Skrull. Now, when it comes to the Super Skrull around this point in time in Marvel Comics, he was a big-time villain for the Fantastic Four, a classic one. Now, he was altered in a way where he is able to use the abilities of the Fantastic Four. So the Human Torch, the Invisible Woman, Mr. Fantastic, and the Thing. Now, the last time he was around, well, he was trying to go back to his home world. But unfortunately, he was turned into energy and stuck inside the radiation belt around the Earth. Now, he was able to escape the belt and go back to Earth. Except when he got back to Earth, he found out that he had cancer. Now, he did fight against Alpha Flight, and Sasquatch sent him back into the radiation belt until this point in time where he was able to break free. But here's the catch now. The cancer he had earlier is no longer around. And the question is, how is that possible? How are you able to be healed from cancer? Now, when it comes to the Silver Surfer, he tells us, the readers, that most likely it has to do with antimatter that's also inside the radiation belt that most likely healed him in his cancer situation. Now, with all that being said, you have the Super Skrull attack Silver Surfer because no matter what, he looks at Surfer as an enemy. Now, Surfer realized that Skrull has been gone for a very long time, and so he has no idea what is currently happening with the Skrull race across the universe, especially when it comes to Galactus. But while you have the two characters fighting against each other, well, they are stopped by no other than the Eternals. Now, when it comes to the Eternals, they tell the Silver Surfer why they are there for. They say, hey man, listen, we are here to grab you because the High Evolutionary realize if we are able to map out your genetics, then most likely we can advance the human race in the right direction into God-like beings. Now, when it comes to the Silver Surfer, he says no, because he knows it is a bad idea to use his genetics as a way to advance the human race. Now, when it comes to Surfer, he loves the Earth. He loves the human race, and he wants to see the human race achieve greatness, but in their own way, not by using his own genetics. Now, we do learn something else very interesting, and that would be the Skrulls. See, you have the Eternals tell Super Skrull that he is a deviant, meaning that the Skrulls are also a genetic failure when it came to the Celestial making different kinds of creations across the universe. Now, Super Skrull cannot believe that, but apparently it is the truth. But you do have the Eternals take both Silver Surfer and Super Skrull back to their base. Now, once you have the heroes arrive back to Earth properly, well, that is the moment you have the Eternals inform the Super Skrull what has been happening to the Skrulls in their empire around this point in Marvel Comics. See, Galactus decided to eat the home world of the Skrulls, which then led them into being fractured into 5 different groups across the universe. But at the same time, they're still trying to win a war against the Kree. And so the Skrulls are really struggling around this point in time. And the Super Skrull cannot believe what he is hearing, and he wants to leave to be there with his fellow brothers. But unfortunately, him and Silver Surfer are thrown into some kind of containers to begin tests on them. Now, while you have the Eternals running their tests on the Super Skrull, Silver Surfer realized the tests are kind of harsh on Super Skrull. And the reason why, because they were made to be used on a deviant who is from Earth, not from the Skrull home planet. And so you had a Surfer wanting to stop, but they don't want to stop. They want to know more about the Skrull deviant line to hopefully try to, well, fix it or to possibly stop it. And so you have Surfer saying, you know what? Enough is enough. If me and Skrull are able to use our powers together, then we'll be able to break free from these containers. There is something else I need to mention about the Skrull race. See, around this time in Marvel Comics, they also lost the ability to shapeshift. Except one person, the Super Skrull, because he was gone for such a long time being stuck inside the radiation belt that now he has the ability to give his race what they have lost, to shape shift. And that is really huge. And that leads into the Silver Surfer saying, listen, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, I don't like what he is trying to do. See, when it comes to Surfer, he agrees that races should evolve over time, except they should evolve naturally on their own terms. When it comes to the High Evolutionary, he's not trying to do that. He's trying to rush things, and that is not okay at all. Now, when it comes to the Super Skrull, is Surfer saying, no, you are different because you are going to help your race get back on track onto what they were when they were evolving, giving back the ability to shape shift. But either way, you had a Surfer kind of help the Eternals realize that, hey, you know what? This could most likely be a wrong thing to do to help him out. And this And so getting into the opening pages for today's video, we do pick up with two mutants, and that will be Bulk and Glowworm. Now, these are two mutants that we have actually met back in X Factor number 7. And remember, these were two mutants like others around the world. When they had gained their mutant ability, well, unfortunately, their body had changed to the point where they were no longer able to hide in public. Now, they did try to hide with the Morlocks, a group of mutants who are very similar to them in their situation, but when it comes to Glowworm and also Bulk, their bodies have absorbed so much radiation that if anybody goes near them, well, they will die because of radiation poisoning. And so Bulk and Glowworm have no choice but to live on their own. But as we dive into today's story, we see them currently being attacked by the Purifiers. Now, the Purifiers are a group of people who work for the High Evolutionary, one of his many groups, who always tries to help him to achieve his goal, which is, again, advancing the human race. And so when it comes to Bulk and Glowworm, they gotta go. Not really just because they are mutants, because their radiation they're emitting when they're walking around the world. That's killing off people left and right who could possibly help advance the human race. And so the Purifiers, their main goal is to capture Bulk and Glowworm and to remove their powers, but to also deal with their radiation that they are emitting. And our two heroes, I say heroes very loosely here, they are able to fight off the Purifiers for a good while, but unfortunately, they are captured and taken away. Now, I do want to establish one thing here. When it comes to the High Evolutionary, he's not going to kill off, mutants left and right unless he believes that the mutant gene or the mutant evolution is going to lead into a dead end. Because think back to our first chapter when he went after the Moiloids. Those characters right there, he thought at first that their evolution path was only going to lead to a dead end, to only see that it wasn't true. And so, if he believes that mutants might have the ability to evolve into a greater state, then he will not kill them off at all. And so when it comes to Bulk and Glowworm, he does not want to kill them. Now we jump over to the new mutants who are currently in the danger room. Now, it's been a while since we have talked about the New Mutants, and I want to sit here real quick and give you a quick reminder of what's happening with them. So, for example, right now, the New Mutants are technically in lockdown because back in Fall of the Mutants, one of their own was killed off, and that would have been Cypher. Now, ever since his death, Magneto has been really protective over the New Mutants, but to the point where they're not really allowed to have any kind of fun at all. For example, they're not allowed to leave school grounds, and they're not allowed to use their powers at all unless it's for training, and that's really it. Now, when it comes to the New Mutants, they're kind of getting fed up with Magneto, but unfortunately, they have nowhere else to go. And so they have no choice but to stay there and kind of follow his rules. But you didn't have Magneto also mention that when it comes to Dani Moonstar, her power is the weakest out of all of them because she's only able to create mirages of different things that she pulled out of people's minds. And so because of that, it doesn't really help the team out when they're out there in the battlefield. And so he established that she has become a great fighter if she really wants to help her team out there in the battles. But getting back over to Glowworm and also Bulk, we see the Purifiers being able to remove their powers, but not really being able to remove the radiation inside their body. And with that being said, I do want to mention that Glowworm and also Bulk are at the end of their life, because back in X Factor number 7, we were told by these characters because they were able to absorb so much radiation that they were already dying at a very slow rate. By this point in Marvel Comics, they're at that point where they are about to die. But we have to shift our focus on the Purifiers because their computer system was able to pick up Magma, who had recently left the New Mutants. Now, Magma is a very powerful character on her own, and so when it comes to the Purifiers, they believe that Magma could be a problem if the human race can possibly evolve. Now, something I should mention about Magma around this time in Marvel Comics is that she left the New Mutants team and joined Emma Frost's team, the Hellions, except after joining the Hellions, well, she received a letter from her father that told her to come back home to their country, Nova Roma. Now remember, when it comes to Nova Roma, they have not really caught up to the ways of the 20th century. They still live like ancient Rome. And with that being said, he was trying to marry off his daughter. Now, after Magma had joined the Hellions, Emma Frost began a plan to gather certain kind of resources from Nova Roma. And so when Magma went back home to her country, well, Emma Frost sent Empath along with her. Now, Magma and Empath, they do have feelings for one another, but Empath is secretly working for Emma Frost to hopefully trick her father to give the resources over to Emma Frost. Now, Empath does feel bad for Magma with the idea of her being forced to marry some other man, but at the same time as him saying, I love her, but I also trying to help Emma Frost out with the master plan. Now, while the two characters are talking, well, out of nowhere, the Purifiers come, they take out Empath, they take out Magma, they grab Magma and teleport back to their base. Now, Empath knows he has to call up Emma Frost, which he does, and he tells her, hey, these guys took her and they teleported away back to their base, but I do have a location. Now, Emma Frost around this time was part of the Hellfire Club, and the reason why I am bringing that up because her main goal is to help out the Hellfire Club. That is why she's hoping to gather resources from Nova Roma. But at the same time, when it comes to her being part of the Hellfire Club, we get reminded so is Magneto. And when it comes to Magneto, the reason why he joined the Hellfire Club was to use their resources as a way to protect the school, to protect the students. And so with her calling up the rest of the members of the Hellfire Club, she has to call up Magneto. For one, hey, your old student got taken away, and two, I need your help to get her back. And so you do have Emma Frost warn Magneto about what happened to Magma. Now, the New Mutants, they were able to listen in on the conversation while Magneto was on the phone with Emma Frost, where they were able to gather what happened to their old team member, Magma, but also knowing where she could possibly be at. And so you do have Magneto leave. He says, you guys have to stay here. I'll be back. Do not leave school grounds and do not use your powers. And he leaves. Now, of course, being teenagers, they are not going to follow those directions at all, especially with the idea on their own has been taken away. And so you do have the New Mutants agree to change into their new outfits to go out of their way to go save Magma's life. Now, once you do have the heroes arrive at the base of the Purifiers, they do go out of their way to fight against the Purifiers to free Magma, and once they free her, she's able to jump in the battle and fight alongside with her old team against the Purifiers. But now we have to shift our focus over to Dani Moonstar. You see, Dani Moonstar, like I said earlier, is the weakest person on the team when it comes to all their abilities, because she's only able to connect her mind to your mind to pull out different information about you and then bring those things to life as a mirage. Now, it's a mirage, it's not real. And now it's not really helpful in a battle like this, because when it comes to the leader of the Purifiers of this Purifier group, he looks at Mirage and her powers as pointless, weak, stupid, because even though she does try to bring out his different fears as mirages, he does not care. He just walks through them. He grabs Dani Moonstar and throw her right into the same machine that he has Bulk and Glowworm on as well, to possibly get rid of her powers. Now, the machine was originally made to get rid of her powers, except when it comes to Mirage, Dani Moonstar, that doesn't happen. Instead, her powers are pushed forward into the next step of their evolution, to the point where now she is able to bring her mirages to life. And so when it comes to the leader of the Purifiers, at first, when he saw demons, they were just mirage. But now those demons have been brought to life and they are able to attack him and the rest of his Purifiers. Now the problem is Dani Moonstar is not really able to control her powers. And so now these demons who had just popped out of nowhere thanks to her abilities are now attacking both the New Mutants and the Purifiers. But they realize if they are able to get rid of one mirage for another, then all she has to do is think of something else, bring that to life to get rid of the demons, which she does. She brings to life her spirit lance. And once she does that, all the demons go away. And you then have the New Mutants being able to take out the Purifiers. Now, right after they were able to get rid of the Purifiers, well, you then have the New Mutants realize the Hellfire Club, Emma Frost, Sebastian Shaw, and Magneto are about to arrive as well. And the New Mutants do not want to be caught at all by Magneto. And so you do have our young heroes teleport back home with Magma before they are found by Magneto and the rest of the Hellfire Club. And the Purifiers, the ones they fought against, were teleported over to Limbo, just in case they do tell Magneto the New Mutants were actually there. Now, once you do have the New Mutants being able to get back to the school, they are able to relax, but now they have to think of an excuse of what happened to them while Magneto was gone, to hopefully think of a new game plan so that he will not find out they have snuck out again, thanks to Magic's ability. Now, with all that being said, Magma still has to go back home, no matter what. But on top of that, Magma has to make sure that she does not mention the New Mutants at all. And now she heads back home, but unfortunately, that means she's back on track to get married to a man that she does not want to marry. And this What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Alright, so we are going to continue our coverage over the Evolutionary War, and now we pick up with Fantastic Four Annual number 21. Now, When it comes to the Fantastic Four, it's not your usual team roster. You do have the Thing in the Human Torch, but you also have Crystal from the Inhumans, and you also have She-Thing as well. Now, with that being said, remember, the Evolutionary War is all about the idea of the High Evolutionary wanting to advance the human race, because when it came to the High Evolutionary, he was able to create a counter Earth on the other side of the sun, except the Earth was taken away by the Beyonders. And when it came to the High Evolutionary, when he went to go confront them to get it back, he realized how powerful they were. And so then he had a new goal, to advance the human race, but this time to hopefully reach the point of godlike creatures. And so when it comes to the Evolutionary War, he has gone out of his way to do different things around the world and on the moon for this book to try to see how he's able to advance the human race. Now, when it comes to this chapter, you are going to have the Inhumans fighting against the Fantastic Four for one character, and that would be, well, Crystal. Now, when it comes to Crystal, she's part of the royal family of the Inhumans because she is the little sister to Medusa, who is the queen of the Inhumans. Now, when it comes to Crystal, the reason why she left the Inhumans to rejoin the Fantastic Four is because of her failed marriage. You see, she was married to Quicksilver. Matter of fact, they had a child together around this time, and her name is Luna. Now, when it came to Quicksilver, he began to not pay her enough attention to the point where she kind of moved on to another man. And of course, that made him very upset, to the point where he began to be evil again and do some evil things to different superhero teams. Now, once all that information came together, when it came to Crystal, she said, hey, listen, I am done with Quicksilver. I'm going to move on and be with somebody else. But when it comes to the royal family, it's not okay to divorce the man that you have supposedly married. You are supposed to work things out and continue to be with that person. And for her, that was not okay at all. And so she left the team to go rejoin the Fantastic Four. Now, here's the thing, because she was also in a relationship with Johnny Storm. And so with her being back, you have these two characters right now kind of going back down memory lane, wondering if they could possibly work things out and get back together. But they can't, because Johnny Storm is married to Alicia Masters. And so unfortunately, these two characters really cannot be together at all. But then out of nowhere, you do have the Fantastic Four be confronted by a hologram-like system from the Inhumans, really from Black Bolt and Medusa, who are trying to contact, well, Crystal to say, hey, you now have to come back home. And the reason why? Because Quicksilver is here, and Quicksilver has forgiven you for, apparently stepping out, but also we believe it's good for you two to work things out and get back together for the sake of the family. Now, for Crystal, it is a automatic no, because again, he turned evil. He had abandoned her and also their daughter in her eyes. And so she believes this man is a lunatic, and there is no way that she'll be able to go back home to just get back with him and pretend like everything is okay. But like I said earlier, when it comes to the Inhuman family, they're really big on just working things out and staying with the person that you had apparently married. But they do tell her, if you don't come back, we are going to force you to come back home to talk things out with Quicksilver to remarry him. And they were not joking at all, because they were able to teleport right over to the Baxter building, the home of the Fantastic Four. And this does lead into a battle between the two teams. Now we have to jump over to the moon, where we pick up with the High Evolutionary, who's about to get ready to attack the home of the Inhumans. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to the High Evolutionary, in our earlier videos, I have mentioned that he has different groups of people that help him achieve different goals around the world. So, for example, we have met the Purifiers and the Eliminators. But now we are being introduced to a third group, and that would be the Gatherers. Now, at this moment right right here, he has the Gatherers and the Eliminators, and they are getting ready to attack the home of the Inhumans, better known as the Attilan. Now, the reason why he's trying to attack their home is to get his hands on the Terrigen Mist, and I really hope I pronounced that first word correctly. Now, when it comes to the Terrigen Mist, it has the ability to unlock an Inhuman's DNA genetics. Let me explain. So if you are just a regular human and you believe that you are just a regular human, out of nowhere, you could be hit with the Terrigen Mist that would then unlock your Inhuman DNA, which means unlock your powers as well. And so when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he believes there's something in there that could possibly help him to advance the human race into godlike creatures. Now, while you have the Gatherers and you also have the Eliminators attacking the home of the Inhumans, out of nowhere, he is confronted by the Watcher. Now, when it comes to the Watcher, his main goal, really his only goal, is to watch, to see how things play out when it comes to us humans. Now, he also gives us a breakdown of what happened so far in the Evolutionary War, but when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he does ask the Watcher, do you believe that what I am doing is the right thing to do to help out the human race? And you have the Watcher say, listen, my only thing to do here is to watch, and that is it. I'm backing out. So besides that, I cannot tell you my opinion. I can only say I am the Watcher. Now, while you do have the Gatherers and the Eliminators attacking the home of the Inhumans, we see that Quicksilver is there as well. Now, he knows when it comes to the Eliminators and the Gatherers, the reason why they are there for the Terrigen Mist. And so he tells everyone there, you have to make sure that these guys are not able to reach that at all. And so he is trying his best to lead an army against the forces of the Eliminators and the Gatherers. Now, getting back over to the battle between the Fantastic Four and the Inhumans, we could say the battle ended on a draw. Now, the reason why I'm saying this because the book is trying to tell us that. But for me personally, I say no, the Inhumans clearly won and the Fantastic Four just lost. But either way, while you have the two teams wondering what to do next, they're both interrupted by one Inhuman who came out of her way to inform both Black Bolt and Medusa what's happening back at home, that their home is being attacked by the Eliminators and also the Gatherers. Now, you do have the two teams agree to work together as a way to protect the Attilan from this unknown force. Now, you do have the Fantastic Four and the Inhumans being able to get back there just in time to help out the Inhumans and Quicksilver to protect their home. And honestly, the next few pages is just a battle to see our heroes fight against the forces of the Eliminators and also the Gatherers. Now, once they do lose the battle, the bad guys, they run back to their master, the High Evolutionary, who just leaves just like that. Now, when it comes to our heroes, their main goal was to continue to follow these guys and to be able to grab one of them to hopefully learn more about what in the world is currently going on. But apparently the High Evolutionary was able to get them all out of there just in time before our heroes were able to grab one. Now, the Watcher knows where they went to. If you have our heroes ask the Watcher, do you know where the guys went off to? So we can find them and hopefully stop them from doing something else on Earth or possibly somewhere else in the universe. Now, like we saw earlier, when it comes to the Watcher, he is not allowed to say anything at all about his opinions or what he has saw. The only thing he can say is, hey, I am the Watcher and my job is to watch, and that is it. Now, out of nowhere, you didn't have another Watcher appear. Now, apparently this was huge because for a long time, our heroes only believed that there was one Watcher, but out of nowhere, there's now two, which kind of brings in the idea, the possibility of an entire race of Watchers. Now, you do have our heroes ask the second Watcher, do you know what happened to the Eliminators, the Gatherers, and when they went to? Now, before the second Watcher is able to say anything, you have Zatu, the first Watcher, say, hey, we are not allowed to say anything at all. It's a quick reminder. And you have both Watchers leave just like that. Now, the book does kind of end on a very quick, fast, wrapped up moment because let's not forget the original purpose of this story, or this chapter, sorry, was really more of, will Crystal leave the Fantastic Four to go back home with the Inhumans? Now, at the beginning of the end point of the story, she says, no, I'm staying with the Fantastic Four, except you have Black Bolt take her somewhere else on the moon so they are allowed to talk to one another. And when it comes to their conversation, he says, I want you to stay because we are family. The entire race, the Inhumans, we are family and we need you back here with us. Now, for her, it's kind of like, who cares? But then she remembers if she does go back home to the Fantastic Four, there is a possibility that Johnny might leave the team because Johnny is also kind of falling back in love with her, but let's not forget he is married and that could ruin his marriage. And so in his mind is more of, I should leave before I do something wrong with her that could possibly ruin my marriage. And she says, to kind of protect Johnny and protect the Fantastic Four, I'll leave instead and come back home to my family, which she does. And the book ends on that note. So for me, this chapter wasn't really that great at all when it comes to the overall picture of the Evolutionary War. Now, here's the thing. We're only halfway through. We still have like 5-6 more chapters to go, which means I could find an even worse chapter than this one right here, but who knows. But with that being said, please what's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Alright, so we are going to continue our coverage over the Evolutionary War. Now, when it comes to the Evolutionary War, it's all about one character, better known as the High Evolutionary, who is trying to advance the human race into god-like beings. Now, the reason why he is trying to accomplish this goal is because, you see, he was able to create a counter-Earth on the other side of the sun, except counter-Earth was taken away by the Beyonders. And so when it came to the High Evolutionary, he went out of his way to confront the Beyonders. And when he did, he realized that they were godlike beings. And that started his goal to seeing if he is able to advance the human race into godlike people. And so each chapter is really him trying to accomplish a different task around the world to possibly advance the human race. Except this chapter is really more of him just trying to restore something that was lost to the earth, and the X-Men are going to help him out. This is the X-Men Annual number 12 chapter. I hope you enjoy. Now, the opening pages of this storyline, we do pick up with Storm being angry, and we have no idea why she is angry. And so you have Storm just flying towards a certain location. Now, our heroes are kind of like us right now, the rest of the X-Men. They're wondering, where in the world is she going to? And the problem is, when it comes to Psylocke, she is not able to read the mind of Storm to figure out where she's possibly going. And so you have Wolverine, who is technically second in charge of the team, tell Rogue to continue to follow Storm, while you have the rest of the team use Madeline Pryor's computer system to hopefully kind of map out the idea of where Storm is heading towards. Now, thankfully, Madeline was able to kind of figure out that Storm is heading over to Antarctica. Now, for most of the X-Men, they're still new, and they're kind of wondering, why in the world would she go somewhere that's so cold? Like, most likely she cannot survive in that area. What's in Antarctica? But for members who've been there for a while, like Wolverine and Colossus, they know it's the Savage Land. Now, if you're new to Marvel Comics, you don't know what is the Savage Land, let me explain just real briefly. The Savage Land is a tropical prehistoric land that's surrounded by volcanoes deep. It is a tropical preserve hidden from the rest of the world. So you have dinosaurs there and other kinds of creatures that would most likely be around in the prehistoric days of the Earth. Now, when our heroes do arrive in the Savage Land, Well, it's not there. It seems like somebody or something was able to completely wipe out the entire Savage Land in one single blow. Now, when it comes to Wolverine and Longshot, by using a combination of their powers, they're able to figure out that this attack happened many weeks ago. And the question is right now, who was able to actually do this? But then we have to jump over to the High Evolutionary. Now, this is where we see the High Evolutionary trying to do something in a way to actually help out the human race. Now, in the past, in other chapters, he has done different things that could have possibly helped out the human race. But this one right here is really more of him trying to bring life back into the area, because he also realized that something happened in the Savage Land, and his goal is to bring it back because he finds a flower. When he finds this flower, he believes that this area has the chance to see life thrive here, except out of nowhere he is attacked by a character better known as, and it would be Terminus. Now, Terminus is a very interesting concept in the world of Marvel Comics. So let me explain. There was a race millions and millions years ago, better known as the Terminex, and their main goal was to go up against the Celestials. And they lost that battle very quickly. Except before they were perished, they were able to create small life forms better known as Terminis. And Terminis would travel across the universe to go to different planets. And once you have one of them being able to reach a planet, they'll then grow in size in their own unique kind of way. And they go through different stages. But once they reach stage 4, they become a huge, gigantic robot. And their goal is to go ahead and kill off the entire planet that they had crashed on. Now, here's the reason why. Because even though the Terminex failed and they all were killed off, they made sure the Terminus would make sure the Celestials would not have the ability to have peace across the entire universe. And so these robots are really a huge challenge for our heroes. But after a few pages, you do have Storm being able to use her powers to blow down the robot and then bury it underneath a bunch of rocks. But our heroes know the robot will sooner or later come back online and continue to battle against our heroes. But after the battle, you then have our heroes ask the High Evolutionary, why in the world is he here in the Savage Land? Is he responsible for what happened to the Savage Land? And he says no. His main goal is to bring it back to life. And he feels like he has the ability to do it. Now, when it comes to the X-Men, they heard of the High Evolutionary, but they never have met the character until now. And when it comes to our heroes, they heard that he was dead. But he says, listen, those reports are false. I'm here right now. I'm trying to tell you guys, you can trust me. And the X-Men, they want to trust him, but at the same time, they feel like they can't. And so what you have the High Evolutionary do is take Havoc with him over to his base that's nearby the Savage Land and show him all the different kinds of things that he was able to create that could possibly help bring back the Savage Land, but to also help advance the human race as well. And this is really important because you have Havoc listen in on what the High Evolutionary is trying to say. And really, when it comes to Havoc, he kind of agrees with everything you have the High Evolutionary talking about when it comes to advancing the human race. Because when you have Havoc listening in, he looks at the High Evolutionary and says, he's very similar to Charles Xavier. Now, he's not saying, oh, it's Charles trying to accomplish a goal of advancing the human race. No, he says both men are trying to help out the human race, trying to make the world a better place. But it seems like if both men fail in a certain area, they're going to hold on to that failure for a very long time. And that's what makes them very similar. When it comes to Havoc, he kind of likes what he hears about the High Evolutionary in his goal, except when it comes to our boy, the High Evolutionary, he's not telling Havoc everything he's done so far in this event that could possibly bother Havoc a lot. But then we jump over to the X-Men, and when we do, we see the X-Men just waiting for Havoc to come back, except they realize that Longshot is missing. Now, you do have the X-Men go out of their way to hopefully find him, but while searching for him, well, then Wolverine also disappears. And this makes things a whole lot worse for most of the team, except Storm, because she realized what exactly is happening here. And so she pulls out a red crystal. Now, this red crystal has the ability to open up a portal into another dimension. And this is a callback to an earlier storyline we have not covered called Classic X-Men number 22. In that storyline, the X-Men, really Storm, was able to travel over to another dimension where she met a lady known as Ren and her people. Now, we were not told the name of their race, and not really told the name of their dimension, but when it came to Ren and Storm, they became close friends. Really, Ren looks at Storm as her daughter, but when it comes to Ren and her people, they were able to save a few people of the Savage Land before it was completely wiped out by Terminus. Now, speaking of Terminus, we do see that he officially came back online, and now he is continuing to attack the area once again. And so now you have Ren and her people fighting alongside the X-Men to hopefully bring it back down again. Except you have Psylocke realize that the robot is not like your usual robot, meaning that it's being operated by somebody on the inside. And so when it comes to Psylocke, she tells Rogue, you need the powers of Longshot to be able to actually break the shell of that armor suit so that we are able to get inside of it and learn who in the world is operating this robot. And you have Rogue exactly do that. And we learn it is The Rock. And I really hope I pronounced Garrock correctly. Now, when it comes to Garrock, we have talked about him in the earlier parts of Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men. Now, he was a sailor that had washed up in the Savage Land, but he found a shrine for the stone god known as Garrock. Now, that sailor, he was then attacked by a bunch of worshippers of that stone god, except when he woke up, he was back in England, but he also realized that he was not able to age anymore. Anyways, he went back over to the Savage Land and became the avatar for the god of Garrock. It really just took the name as well. But either way, when it comes to Garrock, we see him being the one actually controlling the robot. Now, like I said earlier, you do have the Terminus being able to grow to this size, but it needs an operator to be able to actually control it. Except the problem is the last person who was the robot went missing and most likely put Garrock inside the robot suit, which means the real controller of the suit is still out there somewhere in the world. But with Rogue being able to absorb most of his energy and then pull him out of the actual robot suit, the X-Men were able to get rid of it. Now, the story does wrap up very quickly, and honestly, I'm kind of happy so that we are able to move on to the next chapter. But when it comes to Garrock, you have the High Evolutionary realize that he can use him as a way to bring back the Savage Land. He'll technically become part of the land, but with that happening, you'll have the return of the Savage Land. And so you have Garrock get inside a machine. The machine gets turned on, and just like that, the Savage Land has been restored. Dinosaurs are back. The people of the Savage Land were saved by Moran earlier are now able to go back to their home and live a normal life once again. Now, there is something else I do want to mention. The X-Men, to the world, they are supposedly dead. That took place in Fall of the Mutants. And so even though the X-Men were here, the people of the Savage Land has to keep their secret and pretend they are a group of people who just appeared out of nowhere and used their powers to help them out. But in reality, they know it's the X-Men. It's just them keeping the secret from the rest of the world that the X-Men are alive. But either way, this is where What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Alright, so we are going to continue our coverage over the Evolutionary War. Now remember, the Evolutionary War is all about one character, the High Evolutionary, who's trying to advance the human race because he believes that he has the ability to advance us into godlike creatures. You see, when it came to the High Evolutionary, he was able to create a counter-Earth on the other side of the sun. Now, this counter-Earth was actually taken by a group of characters known as the Beyonders. Now, when it came to the High Evolutionary, when he went out of his way to confront the Beyonders, he realized how powerful they were, and he wanted humans to be just like them. And so the entire event, known as the Evolutionary War, is him doing different kinds of things to hopefully accomplish this task. And we jump back over to Spider-Man and his second chapter in this entire crossover. And so getting into today's storyline, we pick up with Peter Parker in Miami. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, hey, wait a second. Why in the world is Peter Parker in Miami? You see, around this time in Marvel Comics, Peter Parker was doing a book tour. He had recently published a book called Webs. It was just a showcase that would show off the different pictures that he had took over the years of Spider-Man, his altered ego. And of course, he's just trying to find a way to show off his work, but to also make some money. Now, with this book tour, he had to go to Miami and do an interview. And this is a way to involve Peter Parker in the next scheme of the High Evolutionary. Now, something else I should mention about Peter Parker around this point in time in Marvel Comics was that he was married to Mary Jane, of course. Now, when it comes to Peter Parker, he's on the phone with Mary Jane, but out of nowhere, he realized that his spider sense is going off like crazy. But then he hears a knock on the door. Now, when he answers the door, he sees the cleaning lady for the hotel. Now, her name is Cecilia, but he's kind of wondering why in the world would this random lady be able to set off his spider sense. Now, when it comes to this lady, she does tell Peter Parker her entire life story, which I'm going to save for later parts of this video. But once she's done telling her story to Peter and done cleaning up his hotel room, as she is walking away, she's kind of wondering why in the world did she tell Peter Parker, a random man, her life story, but we also see her talking to somebody and we're kind of left to wonder, who in the world is she talking to? But then we pick up with the Eliminators. Now, the Eliminators are one of the three groups that work for the High Evolutionary, the Purifiers, the Eliminators, and also the Gatherers. Now, you would think, okay, their names are the Eliminators, which means they're about to eliminate somebody. No. Instead, what they are going to do is use a device that was given to them by the High Evolutionary, which does rip a hole in reality to the nexus point to all realities across Marvel's multiverse. Now, once they do that, you have every single member of this group being affected by some kind of energy that is being released by this hole. Now, this energy is also attracting Man-Thing as well. Now, Man-Thing is wondering what to do here, except as he gets closer and closer to the hole, well, then he becomes affected by it to the point where he literally explodes. And we're left to wonder, hey, what happened to Man-Thing here? But then we pick up with the Kingpin, and we see the Kingpin on the phone with another character known as Slug. Now, Slug first appeared in Captain America number 324. Now, when it comes to Slug, he's also a big-time drug lord in Florida. Now, the reason why the two guys are currently talking to one another is because they're having a hard time selling drugs in their area because what happened in Colombia. And that part right there is very important because what happened in the earlier chapters of the Evolutionary War. Let me explain. So when it came to the Punisher, he went to Colombia to kill off a drug lord, except when he arrived there, so did the Eliminators, who also work for the High Evolutionary. Either way, at the end of that chapter, the drug lord died. And that is a huge problem because he was responsible for all the drugs being sold in the Kingpin's area and also Slug's area as well. The entire process got messed up. And so currently the two guys trying to figure out what exactly happened when it came to drugs being sold in their areas. And so you have the two guys talking to one another to make sure it was not one of their men who at fault for the reason why drugs are not selling in their areas. But then we have to jump back over to Cecilia. And remember, she is the cleaning lady we saw earlier at Peter Parker's hotel. Now, when it comes to her, we see her again talking to herself, it seems. But then we realize that she's hearing some kind of voice in her head. Except we have no idea if this could be a medical problem or some kind of symbiote living inside of her. Either way, this other voice tells her to get a babysitter to watch her son because they have to go out there hunting tonight for some people. But then we jump back over to the High Evolutionary. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he does explain what is his latest scheme here for this chapter. And he tells us, listen, the Everglades is the nexus point to all realities across Marvel's multiverse. But if you are able to rip a hole into that reality, a particular kind of genetic substance can fall out. Now, usually this particular kind cannot survive in Earth's reality, but sometimes some of them can. And they'll be able to adapt and live on. And so when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he's telling his eliminators, if you find any kind of this genetic substance, hopefully you are able to capture it and keep it alive, because this can help me advance the human race. Now, I kind of want to jump back over to Cecilia to kind of show you guys that even though she's hearing voices and she's going out there apparently hunting people, her main goal is still to protect her son, to be there for her son. And so when we jump back over to her, we see her coming home and telling her son that she has to go out tonight to do some more things to kind of help take care of her, but also take care of him. And it seems like he understands, but at the same time wishes that his mom would just stay home to be with him. But we also see that she's still hearing voices from some other person. But then we jump over to Peter Parker. Now, this is Peter Parker saying, you know what? I'm having a hard time getting some sleep. Why not go ahead and try to get a bite to eat and then come back here and try to get some sleep? Except on his way over to a nearby diner, he is confronted by a guy who's a drug dealer known as Santo. Now, Peter tells Santo, hey, I don't want any drugs out of my way. All I want is a burger. Except when Peter walks into the diner and then turns around, he realizes that Santo is being attacked by a group of guys who work for Slug, because Slug believes that Santo could be responsible for why the Colombian drugs had not reached America recently. Because how in the world is Santo able to continue to sell drugs in the area? But either way, you do have Peter Parker jump in as Spider-Man to save Santo's life and then take him to a nearby rooftop so that they're able to have a one-on-one conversation. Now we jump over to Cecilia, and when we do, we see her getting out of the shower, and you see her still talking to the voice in her head, but apparently how the two characters come together as one to agree on the idea that she has a code name for herself, and that code name is Poison. And we still have no idea what exactly is going on with this character. But getting back over to Spider-Man, you had Santo tell Peter that basically the only reason why he is able to continue to sell drugs in the area because he has a stash in a nearby area, better known as the Everglades. That is how he is able to continue to sell drugs, unlike the other drug lords. Now, as soon as Spider-Man leaves, well then Santo is confronted by the Purifiers, the other group that works for the High Evolutionary. Now, when it comes to the Purifiers, well, their main goal is to purify the world. And so if they believe that your genetics should not be passed on to your children, they'll find a way to make sure that you are not able to, have a way to carry your genes on. And so they purify him and they just leave. So now we have to jump back over to Poison, except when we do, we see that Poison is sitting outside her apartment complex where she is confronted by members of the Purifiers, which tells us their main goal is to purify her, except they have no idea that she has different kinds of abilities that can help her take them down very easily. Now, when it comes to her powers, I kind of had a hard time figuring out what in the world her powers are, and so I went to a nearby fandom page. And the fandom page says that she can kill people by just giving them a glance. Yep, that's what it says. And so either way, you have all the members of the Purifiers just die just like that. But now we have to jump over to Spider-Man. Now, when we do, we see Spider-Man being able to find Santo's hidden stash of drugs that allowed him to continue to sell drugs in the area. Except, out of nowhere, Spider-Man is then confronted by some members who work for Slug. Now, these guys, they are easily mowed down by a group of Purifiers who, again, work for the High Evolutionary. Now, once you have those guys getting killed, you then have Spider-Man realize that something once again is setting off his spider sense. And we already know what that is. It has to be Cecilia. And when we jump back over to Cecilia, we see her saying goodbye to the other person inside her head. Now, this other person, it does inform us and Cecilia that it had completely changed her, but it also had changed her son as well. Now, we are not told what this being actually means by that, but maybe down the road we can find out what it actually means. But either way, you do have this being able to leave the body of Cecilia by being some kind of smoke that is exiting her body and going into the hole in reality. And once it's able to go through the hole, it closes the hole behind it, and that takes care of that problem over there. Now, the rest of the story does get wrapped up very quickly because once you have Man-Thing being able to come back to help out Spider-Man fight against Slug's men, but also fighting against the Purifiers, once both groups are taken care of, you then have Peter Parker take the guys over to a nearby police station. And then after that, he goes to his hotel room to finally get some rest, except he hears another knock on the door, and this time it's Mary Jane. And the chapter ends on that. What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Alright, so we are going to continue our coverage over the Evolutionary War, and now we pick up with the West Avengers Annual 3, the B-list Avengers team, if I may say. Now, when it comes to the Evolutionary War, it's all about one particular character, and that would be the High Evolutionary. So when it comes to the High Evolutionary, his main goal is to advance the human race into god-like beings. Let me explain. So when it came to the High Evolutionary, he was able to create a counter Earth on the other side of the sun, except that Earth was taken by the Beyonders. Now, when it came to the High Evolutionary, he went out of his way to confront the Beyonders to only learn that they're god-like beings. And after meeting them, he believed that he has the ability to advance the human race into that level of power, into god-like beings. And so the entire point of the Evolutionary War is him doing different things that could possibly help evolve the human race. And when it comes to the West Coast Avengers, this is now him beginning a new plan that could possibly work. Now we kind of find out his new plan is to actually used some kind of genetic bomb. Now, for him to be able to pull this off, he's missing one component, and that would be vibranium. And we already know where this story is most likely going to go. Over to Wakanda. Now, before we dive into that right there, I do want to mention that when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he does have different groups he uses as a way to help him achieve his different goals. So for example, we have met the Purifiers, the Gatherers, and also the Eliminators. But now we're being introduced to another team, and that will be the Technicians. Now, right off the bat, you already know what they are used for as a way to build different kinds of devices that could possibly help the High Evolutionary reach his goals. And currently, the Technicians are helping him build this new genetic bomb that should supposedly advance the human race. But like I said earlier, they need vibranium. And so you do have the Gatherers about to leave to go attack Wakanda to collect that resource. But before we see that happen, we do see one of the Technicians who is going to be very important for this video put a note inside one of the Gatherers, hoping that maybe an Avenger could find it and possibly save him. He is trying to escape. Now, unfortunately for the Gatherers, they don't get that far when it comes to attacking Wakanda, because as soon as they get to the borders, well, they were confronted by Black Panther and a few members of his private guard or possibly part of the army. Either way, it does not matter, because you do have Black Panther being able to shut down the Gatherers' advances. Now, you do have Black Panther grab one of the members of the Gatherers, and when he does that, he finds the note we saw earlier when it came to that one Technician who put that note inside the armor of this guy. And we kind of find out that his name is William Foster. Now I'll explain more about him later on, but in the note, he is begging for help, and he says, listen, you have to help me and come to this location right here on the map, but you need to contact one person who could most likely help me, and that would be Dr. Henry Pym, aka Hank Pym. And so you have Black Panther say, you know what? Let me go ahead and call up the Avengers. Now, it's not the main team Avengers. Like I said earlier, it is the West Coast Avengers. And so when they do arrive, we are introduced to some members of the team. It will be Wonder Man, Vision, Scarlet Witch, and also Hawkeye. Now, when it comes to Black Panther, he's wondering, hey, where's Hank Pym? But also, where's your wife, Hawkeye? Because he was married to Mockingbird around this time. And when it came to the West Coast Avengers, they had some issues of their own. Hank Pym is no longer on the team. And also Mockingbird, Tigra, and also Moon Knight have also left the team. And so these are the only few people who could come over to Wakanda to possibly help Black Panther out. Now, when they do arrive, he does show them the letter that came from Dr. Foster. Now, Scarlet Witch, she knows who he is, and she tells us that he was a lab assistant to Hank Pym, who was able to duplicate, had a hard time saying that, the growth powers that Hank Pym had, and became to Black Goliath. Now, after becoming Black Goliath, he was able to be a hero for a short period of time until he ran into Atom Smasher, who gave him deadly radiation. He got cancer. Now, he was able to find a cure thanks to a blood transfusion from Spider-Woman Jessica Drew. But the problem is, after everything he went through, well, he's no longer able to grow in size like he used to, because his body cannot possibly handle that kind of strain. Now, while you have Black Panther learning more about Black Goliath, well, that is when you have T'Challa realize that, well, Wakanda is about to be attacked once again. Now, when it comes to Wakanda being attacked, they're being attacked by a certain group of characters. For me personally, I found just flat out ridiculous. And their names are the Censors. Now, each member of the team, their powers are based off a different sense that you use in the real world. So, for example, one member would have the power of sight, another one the power of touch, sound, smell, taste, and last but not least, intuition. Now, at first, our heroes, they do struggle fighting against this team because a lot of times they're using their powers against an opponent whose sense could easily overcome our hero's abilities. But once our heroes realize, hey, if his ability is sight, then why not try to attack another sense that he's not strong in, like smell or taste? But either way, once you do have our heroes being able to overcome the sensors, well, Black Panther realized that they were being used as a way to distract him, because one of the gatherers, technically a right-hand man to the High Evolutionary, was able to sneak into the Great Mound to get their hands on a good handful of vibranium and then head back over to the High Evolutionary. Now, Black Panther knows, okay, you know what, is already a lost cause, but he does realize there was a note that was left in the armor of one of the gatherers that came from Dr. Foster. In that note, it had a location for our heroes to go to. Now, that location is the newest base of the High Evolutionary in the Savage Land. Now, let's not forget, in the earlier parts of the Evolutionary War, we saw the X-Men being able to bring back the Savage Land after it was completely destroyed. And the reason why I'm bringing that up, because once you have the West Coast Avengers begin to head over to a location that was told to them by Dr. Foster's note, they realize the Savage Land is alive again, and they're kind of wondering how. Now, when it comes to our heroes arriving at the location that Dr. Foster told them to go to, all they find is a huge crater, and we're left to wonder what in the world happened here that left behind a huge crater. Now, luckily for us, there is a second story that really tells us what happened before our main West Coast Avengers had arrived at that crater. And so we have to focus on the three members that had left the team. That will be Tigra, also Moon Knight, and Mockingbird. Now, when they do arrive in the Savage Land, they are very surprised to see, because like I said earlier, they were told, really a lot of heroes were told, that the Savage Land was no longer around, except now it's back again. Now, when the three heroes do arrive in the Savage Land, they are confronted by Kazar. Now, Kazar, he is literally a native of the Savage Land. He's been there for a very long time, but either way, you do have our, I want to call members of the Avengers, go over to Kazar asking, what in the world happened here? We were told the Savage Land was no longer around, and guess what? Here it is. And he explains what happened in the previous chapters, but either way, he does say it also came back because of the High Evolutionary, and his base is over there. Now, when it comes to our heroes, they never heard of the High Evolutionary, and so they're kind of wondering, what kind of person is he? Is he a good guy or a bad guy? And so you have our heroes say the goodbyes to Kazar and his wife and his new baby to head straight over to the base of the High Evolutionary. Now, at first, when they do arrive, everything does seem to be normal. When they walk into the base, they are actually given a tour of the actual facility that belongs to the High Evolutionary. Now, while walking around, you see Dr. Foster, and he does see some members of the Avengers, except these are one, the Avengers who left the main team, and two, these three members have no idea, one, that Dr. Foster is there, but two, they don't even know who he is. And so he's kind of wondering, okay, are they here to save me? Now, like I said, at first, they're kind of believing everything is somewhat normal. As they're walking around, they're kind of like, okay, very nice facility, high-tech stuff, okay, we're good. But until they meet the High Evolutionary. Now, when they meet him, he tells them, hey, listen guys, straight up, this is what I am going to do. I am going to use a genetic bomb to advance the human race. Now, as soon as he said genetic bomb, these three members of the Avengers, they freak out. They're kind of like, no way, bro. We got to stop you right now before you are able to release that bomb. Now, here's the thing. He does release a gas to knock them out. Now, Moon Knight is able to continue to fight on for a few more minutes. And the only reason why, because his body is supposedly powered by the moon god Khonshu. But either way, once you do have Moon Knight pass out, you then have the High Evolutionary say, take every single one of them and put them inside my maze. Now, when it comes to the maze, it's really used as a way to actually test out people for the High Evolutionary. Now, when it comes to our members of the Avengers, each of them were assigned a robot to actually fight against. Now, all three heroes were able to take down the robots, but only Mockingbird was able to pass the test. Let me explain why. Because when it comes to Tigra and Moon Knight, after being able to take down their robots, well, their attention, their game plan is not to find the High Evolutionary, but to find each other. And I don't know why every single time I read a book that has Tigra inside of it, it's just her trying to get her rocks off. I mean, yes, I do know why she's like that, but it's like, can I get one book where she's not trying to get a guy? Either way, when it comes to Mockingbird, her main goal is to go after the High Evolutionary. And so that intrigues him very much, to the point where he wants to use her to test out his genetic bomb. Now, I'm going to skip over to the point where you have Mockingbird confront the High Evolutionary. Now, he does explain to her that he does find her very intriguing, to the point where he wants to use her for his genetic bomb. But when it comes to Mockingbird, she's not really down with that whole idea, and she tries her best to actually fight against him. Now, at first, she does struggle, and then it seems she might be able to take him down. But because when it comes to the High Evolutionary, almost every single part of his armor is so advanced with technology that he was able to grow in size and take her down very easily. Now, you have Dr. Foster walk into the room. Now, here's the thing. When he does, you have the High Evolutionary kind of wondering why in the world is a technician in his room trying to stop him from knocking out Mockingbird. And this is where you have Dr. Foster tell us that the only reason why he joined the High Evolutionary group is because he heard that he was working on something where it involves genetics. It was Dr. Foster hoping to regain his power, but once he does, if he does grow in size, his body can actually withstand the strain of his size being different than usual. And so we kind of find out that he was able to cook up some kind of serum that allowed him to get his powers back. And so we do see the return of Black Goliath being able to go toe-to-toe with the High Evolutionary. Now, their battle does not last that long for two reasons. One, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he says, you know what? I kind of like what I'm seeing right now when it comes to different people of the human race. Because when he looks at Black Goliath, he's saying, you went out of your way to evolve yourself. And that right there is very key when it comes to the evolution of the human race. Now, the High Evolutionary, he does get a call saying, hey, listen, boss, we were able to get our hands on some vibranium. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, this base is no longer safe at all for him to continue his work on his genetic bomb. And so he tells everyone, we're going to dip out and finish our project somewhere else. But this base right here is going to self-destruct. Now, when it comes to Goliath, he was able to get Mockingbird, Moon Knight, and Tigra out of the building and protect them from the explosion. So now we know where this crater actually came from. And this allows us to catch up to the present moment, where you have this group of Avengers leave to hopefully chase after the High Evolutionary. But right after they left, the other team we saw in the earlier parts of this video arrived just to find out there's some huge crater wondering where in the world it came from. What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over the Evolutionary War, and now we pick up with part 10. Now, part 10 is going to be another Spider-Man chapter, except this time it's going to come from the Spectacular Spider-Man series, annual number 8. Now, with that being said, this is a very important chapter because we do see the return of Gwen Stacy. Yes, you heard that right. The return of Gwen Stacy. Now remember, the whole point of the Evolutionary War is that one guy, better known as the High Evolutionary, is trying his best to advance the human race because he was able to create a counter-Earth, except that counter-Earth was actually taken from him by the Beyonders. Now, he did go out of his way to confront them, except when he did, he found out the Beyonders are God-like beings. And after that meeting, he went back to Earth and said, you know what? It's my time to try to help out the human race and to advance us into God-like beings. And so the whole point of the Evolutionary War is really him trying different schemes to kind of help advance the human race. But the last few chapters do go together because his latest scheme is him trying to use a genetic bomb to hopefully begin the process of advancing the human race. And so getting into the opening pages for today's video, we do pick up with Spider-Man just minding his business. He was just sitting there petting a cat and kind of wondering about the idea of getting a pet cat, but also wondering if MJ, Mary Jane, likes cats, except out of nowhere a blast almost hits him, but he realized that blast was not meant for him. That blast was meant for somebody else. Something's happening nearby him. And so when he jumps over to see what's happening, well, he sees the gatherers trying to collect a woman. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he uses different groups as a way to help him achieve his goals. You have the Purifiers, you have the Eliminators, you also have the Gatherers and the Technicians as well. But currently, we're seeing the Gatherers trying to grab this woman, except apparently she has been able to escape not once but twice before this moment right here. They're having a hard time getting her, but now with Spider-Man being involved, they most likely are not going to be able to get her. Now, once you do have Peter Parker join the battle, he comes to find out the woman they are trying to grab is Gwen Stacy. And that's a huge problem because Gwen Stacy died back in Amazing Spider-Man number 122. And so he knows it has to be a clone. But the problem is he's too busy right now trying to protect her. Now, once he's able to kind of defeat the Gatherers to make them retreat, well, Gwen Stacy had disappeared. Now, something else I should mention. Before Gwen Stacy died, she believed that Spider-Man was an evil person, but she had no idea that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. And so even though you have Spider-Man go out of his way to save her life from the Gatherers, once she saw him, she freaked out and ran away. But he knows where she's going. She's going to his apartment. And so he has no choice but to change into his Peter Parker outfit to confront her. Now, we do learn from the High Evolutionary why he's so interested in the Gwen Stacy clone, because he says when it comes to her being around, it could possibly ruin the advancement of the human race, but at the same time, she is a genetic experiment that should not be around at all. It needs to be destroyed. But before it is destroyed, I want to study it to learn more about it and how in the world this clone was actually created. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he does mention that he has something else he must take care of, while you have the Gatherers go out of their way once again to hopefully find Gwen Stacy and bring her back over to their master. But then we shift our focus back onto Peter Parker. Now, when it comes to Peter Parker, we already know that he knows most likely that this is a clone. But for Peter Parker, it's still kind of hard to process the idea that your dead girlfriend clone is around again, and also you still have feelings for Gwen Stacy, even though she has been dead for a good while now. But on top of that, he's married. He's married to Mary Jane. And so when she comes home and she realizes that her husband's kind of sad about something, he tells her, hey, Gwen Stacy is alive, or the clone is alive and she's here again. But then we jump over to the High Evolutionary. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he does head over to a celestial spaceship. Now, here's the thing. On a celestial spaceship, you have a group of characters better known as the Young Gods. And the Young Gods were a very interesting concept that Marvel just quickly dropped in the 1980s. This group only appeared about 15 times, and that's really it. Now, here is their origin story. So, when it came to the Celestials, the third host, he came over to Earth and said, hey, I am going to judge the human race. If I feel like you guys are not worth to keep around, I'm going to wipe you out unless you are able to prove to me that you are a race we should keep around. And so what you had happen next was you had the different gods of Earth go around the Earth to find 12 men and women who can represent mankind's ideals. Now, this is going to be very important because once you have the different gods find the different 12 men and women, they begin to offer up these men and women over to the third host. And the reason why? Because they had a huge amount of power. And this power was kind of like God-like powers, which kind of shows that the human race deserves to stay alive, because if these 12 beings have the ability to become gods, then what could happen to the rest of the human race down the road? We deserve to live. And the third host agreed. But he took the 12 young men and women and handed them over to 2 people to begin their training into godhood. And that is where you have the High Evolutionary come in. Because once he heard about these young gods, he's kind of like, wait a second. There were a group of humans that became godlike beings. That means my goal is actually possible, which means the human race can become gods down the road. This is great. And so he goes out of his way to observe them, except when he does, he's kind of upset in what he sees, because all he sees is just a group of young men and women with godlike powers, but technically not using them in a way of like gods. Instead, using their powers like children. And that right there really bothers him. He wants to make sure once the human race becomes godlike beings, they do act like gods, not like children. And so he leaves. Except before he leaves, he was caught by the young gods. And you have one of them being able to figure out what he was actually up to by reading his mind. Now, once she tells the rest of her crew what's happening back on Earth when it comes to the High Evolutionary, you did have the young gods split up, because half of them say, you know what, that's Earth's problem. We are gods and we have to stay here and train until we're properly ready. But the other half says, no, we should go out of our way to help out our race because, hey, we don't want another Holocaust. Like literally, that is their example. Like, hey, the possibility of 6 million people dying right now because of that man is too huge for us to ignore. And so you have half of the young gods head back to Earth to possibly stop the High Evolutionary. But then we have to jump over to Peter Parker and Mary Jane and continue with their drama. Now, their drama is really more that Mary Jane wants to know, is Peter Parker going to leave her? Is he going to leave her for Gwen Stacy? That's her main problem right there, because Gwen Stacy was Peter Parker's first love. He didn't lose her because of breakup. It's because she died. He still feels responsible for her death when he was fighting against the Green Goblin. And so for Peter, it's like, yeah, I still love her, but at the same time, it has to be a clone. It cannot be the real Gwen Stacy. I already know that. But at the same time, for Peter, it's kind of like, can this be another opportunity to get with Gwen Stacy and try to live a life with her? Is Peter kind of just going all different kinds of places, but at the same time still want to be with Mary Jane? Now, before our two characters are able to have a conversation with one another, the clone Gwen Stacy appears, and she freaks out because at first she believes that she's coming to Peter Parker for comfort, but then finds out that Peter Parker is, well, Spider-Man. And she hates Spider-Man, and so she runs off. And Peter knows he has to chase after her to actually help her. But Mary Jane says, you better come back to me, but you better know which one of us you are going to choose. But here comes the problem, because once you have Peter Parker being able to catch up to the clone Gwen Stacy, well, she's attacked again by the Gatherers, because again, the High Evolutionary wants to study her and then get rid of her, literally destroy her. And so you do have Spider-Man jump in and try his best to protect her. But once you have the Gatherers being able to grab her, they begin the process of teleporting back over to the new base of the High Evolutionary. But Peter Parker was sitting near the giant robot, and so he also got teleported over to this new base for the High Evolutionary. Now, the next section, a lot of different things happen all at once. A whole lot of mess. Let me explain. So, you do have the Gatherers being able to take Gwen Stacy and put her inside a genetic scanner, because again, the High Evolutionary wants to study her. Now, when it comes to Spider-Man, he wants to save her, but he has no choice but to fight through the army of Gatherers inside this base. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he knows Spider-Man very well, because this is Spider-Man's third chapter in this crossover event. He knows that Spider-Man was the reason why two of his schemes earlier were technically ruined. But this time he says, no, you are not going to stop this scheme right here, not knowing that the High Evolutionary is about to release some kind of genetic bomb. Either way, while you have Spider-Man fighting against the Gatherers and Gwen is being scanned, well, then you have the Young Gods appear. Now, when they appear, their main goal is to go after the High Evolutionary. But things continue to get even crazier, because then the other half of Young Gods, who did not want any part of this at all, came here to get the other half of their team and take them back to their spaceship. And so now you have this all-out brawl between the Young Gods, the Gatherers, Spider-Man, and while all that is happening, the High Evolutionary is just scanning Gwen Stacy. Now, everything does get wrapped up when you do have the Young Gods leave, and the High Evolutionary is able to continue on with his goal. But the problem is, Spider-Man still has no idea what in the world is going on. But either way, he is able to pull Gwen out of the scanner and hoping that he can leave. Now, before you have Peter Parker and Gwen being able to leave and go back to New York, they're stopped by the High Evolutionary, who then tells them, hey, what you have right there is not even a clone of Gwen Stacy. Matter of fact, it was a poor woman who was grabbed by Miles Warren, and she was given a virus. And with that virus, it had genetically changed her to look like Gwen Stacy and to act like Gwen Stacy, but she never was Gwen Stacy. And so for Peter Parker, that's a problem, because he was kind of hoping to spend some time with the clone Gwen Stacy, because again, he still feels responsible for the death of the original Gwen Stacy. But now he finds out the woman right here next to him is not even a clone. It's somebody else whose life got messed with thanks to Miles Warren. Now, the High Evolutionary does send Peter and fake Gwen back over to New York, except as soon as they arrive, you have Daydreamer appear. Now, when it comes to Daydreamer, she's one of the Young Gods, and she said, listen, While I was there in that base with you guys, I realized that she is not who she believes she is. And so I'm going to use my ability to give her her life back. And so, just like that, the poor woman who was forced to think and act and look like Gwen Stacy is now able to think and act and look just like her old self again. And she leaves. And so Peter realized that this is most likely a sign to move on from Gwen and go be with your wife, Mary Jane. And he does. And this chapter What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Alright, so we are going to continue our coverage over the Evolutionary War. Really, we are about to dive into the final chapter of the war. Yes, you heard that right. The final chapter of the war. Now remember, when it came to the Evolutionary War, it was all about one character, known as the High Evolutionary. You see, his main goal was to advance the human race into god-like beings. Let me explain why. You see, he was able to create a counter Earth on the other side of the sun, except that Earth was taken away from him by the Beyonders. Now, when it came to the High Evolutionary, he did go out of his way to confront the Beyonders, except when he did that, he realized that they're powerful god-like beings. And so because of that, he said, you know what? I should go back to Earth and try to lead the human race into god-like beings like the Beyonders. And so the entire Evolutionary War is really him just trying to pull off different schemes to possibly help advance the human race. Now, the last couple chapters has all been about his latest scheme to release a genetic bomb into the world that can supposedly advance the human race. Now, here's the thing. He is going to be stopped by the Avengers, except around this time there was no Avengers, because we do see a new team come together to basically stop him. Really more a reserve team to come together to stop him. Now, the opening pages for today's storyline is bringing back a certain character that was dead for a short while in Marvel Comics, and that would be Jocasta. You see, Jocasta was actually created by Ultron so that he could have a mate. What he also did was he tried to transfer the mind of the Wasp into the body of Jocasta. Now, the process actually worked, except you had the Avengers reverse the whole process, putting the mind of the Wasp back into her own body. And so Jocasta was just an empty shell once again. But after a while, she came online by herself. And here is the reason why. A small piece of the Wasp's mind was still inside the body of Jocasta. And so technically, Jocasta was just the robot version of the Wasp, but who also joined the Avengers. Now, she was killed off again later on, but now we see she's being brought back to life by the agents who work for the High Evolutionary. Now, we do not learn why they are trying to bring her back to life, but they do believe that they have wiped out her entire memory, except that's not completely true. She was able to remember just enough to realize that something's off about this situation, and so she runs over to a phone and being able to call the Avengers, except there's no one able to answer the call. So we jump over to the Hydro base. Now, when it comes to the Hydro base, it was actually one of the last few places that was used by the Avengers. You see, around this time, the Avengers were disbanded, and so you have no one there to actually answer the call that Jocasta left behind. She's trying to warn the Avengers about what the High Evolutionary is trying to do. the genetic bomb. But with no one being there, the computer system realized it had to call in the reserve members. And so the first to appear was the Captain, better known as Captain America. But around this time, him and the American government had a disagreement. So he's just going by the Captain. Now, once he arrives and hears that the call came from Jocasta, he can't believe it because she died a while back. She was vaporized. And so he is very confused on how in the world she was able to send a message. But you do have Steve Rogers wait for everyone else to arrive. And that would be Falcon, Hercules, Beast, Hulk, and the female Yellow Jacket. Now, the female Yellow Jacket, her name is Rita Damara. Now, when she first appeared in Marvel Comics, she was somebody who actually stole the Yellow Jacket outfit from Hank Pym, and she was somewhat a bad guy. But this begins the process of her joining the Avengers and becoming a good guy. Either way, you have everyone come together very confused about what in the world is going on. But you didn't have Steve Rogers tell everybody, hey, listen, somebody, Jocasta, made a call over to the base. Now, I don't believe it's Jocasta, but just in case, we should most likely check it out. And so you have the Avengers head over to where the call came from, one of the many bases that belongs to the High Evolutionary. Now, once you do have our heroes arrive at the base or one of the many bases of the High Evolutionary, our heroes in the Hulk infers. Now, when it comes to the Hulk, he makes sure to clear the place out as a way to save Jocasta, but he also makes sure to leave one scientist alive to help our heroes get caught up in what is happening when it comes to the Evolutionary War. Now, here's the thing, because this scientist does give us some more information we did not know about. Like, yes, we already knew that when it came to the High Evolutionary, he was working on a genetic bomb, and that genetic bomb was going to advance the human race. But here's the thing, he is going to release the bomb inside a volcano, and when it happens, the ashes in a volcano is going to make the virus into a airborne virus, and every single human that the High Evolutionary believes has the right to evolve is going to evolve by 1 million years in a matter of seconds. But here's the problem. When it comes to the main base of the High Evolutionary and also the genetic bomb is being kept in an underwater base. A base where none of the jets the Avengers have at the moment is able to reach. And so now they have to find a different way to reach that base. We also kind of find out that the reason why you had Jocasta come back to life is because when it came to the High Evolutionary, he wanted more information about the Avengers. And when it came to Jocasta, she was able to store some very detailed information about the Avengers. Now, you do have our heroes head over to Lamera. Now, Lamera is one of the two underwater kingdoms in the world of Marvel Comics, the other being Atlantis. Now, here's the thing. The reason why our heroes went over here is to hope to get some information from Atuma, the king of Lamera. Because if somebody has an underwater base that is currently being used as a way to advance the human race, the kingdom of Lamera might have some information that could possibly help out the Avengers. Except when our heroes do arrive in Lamera, well, they're being attacked by Atlantis. Now, yes, the two kingdoms, they do hate one another, but this battle right here, it seems very weird. It seems like both sides were brought here for a certain reason. And then out of nowhere, you have the Purifiers appear. Now, the Purifiers are one of the 4 groups that work for the High Evolutionary. That would be the Purifiers, the Eliminators, the Gatherers, and also the Technicians. Now, when it comes to the Purifiers, their main goal is to purify the human race. You see, what they do is they go around the world to find a specific group of people, and then they purify those group of people by sterilizing them. And so when it comes to the High Evolutionary, he is saying that the people of Atlantis and the people of Lemera should be purified, sterilized. They cannot be part of the evolution of the human race. They are only going to hold it back. And so the Purifiers' main goal was to bring both kingdoms here and then just sterilize both groups. But luckily for both kingdoms, the Avengers were here to help out and stop this plan before it could actually happen. But now you have both the King of Atlantis and the King of Lemera wanting to help out the Avengers to take down the High Evolutionary, to find his base. Now, once you do have the Avengers, the Atlanteans, and also Lemurians work together to find the base of the High Evolutionary, the Atlanteans and the Lemurians are going to cause a distraction long enough to allow the Avengers to sneak inside the base of the High Evolutionary. Now, the High Evolutionary, he knows that his base is being attacked. He tells everyone, hey, battle stations right at this moment. We have to protect the base, but we also have to protect the genetic bomb as well. But either way, the Avengers are able to work their way through the base of the High Evolutionary. Except once you do have our heroes being able to reach a room, that is when they learn a tad bit more about the High Evolutionary. You see, we kind of find out that the High Evolutionary was actually able to build a religion around himself. Yes, you heard that right. The people who work for him, the Purifiers, the Gatherers, the Eliminators, and the Technicians, and anybody else who work for him, they praise him like he is some kind of god. And the reason why? Because he is so advanced in technology that basically he is a god to these people. Now, here's the thing, because the people who are priests for this religion, they're better known as new men. You see, new men were groups of animals that the High Evolutionary was able to evolve into actual humans. Not like they look like humans, but they think and act like humans, but they still look like animals. And that is really important. And the reason why, because everybody else who's not a Newman, they believe the Newmen are just regular humans wearing animal masks, not realizing that there actually are real animals. Now, when it comes to the Avengers, they kind of realize that they can use this as another way to distract the entire army of the High Evolutionary. And so when it comes to Beast, he pretends to be a new man, but on a phone call. And on this supposed phone call, he is talking about the idea of the genetic bomb going off. But the bomb's real purpose is to wipe out the human race, to only leave behind the new men, so the new men can be able to take over the actual Earth. Now, the humans who hear this, they're kind of like, wait a second. You're going to tell us the priests for our religion are actually animals that were evolved into humans, and the entire purpose of this whole entire organization is to help them, not us? That is not okay at all. And so now the Avengers were able to cause a civil war inside the actual army of the High Evolutionary, causing him more problems at the moment he's trying to release the genetic bomb. Now, this is where you had a story really get wrapped up very quickly. Let me explain. So you have our heroes walk into a genetic lab. Now, once they do walk into the genetic lab, they find a device that's actually able to evolve you very similar if you were hit with the genetic bomb. Now, when it comes to our heroes, what they want to do is put one of their own inside the actual device and evolve that person into a godlike being that can go toe-to-toe with the High Evolutionary, because they realize the High Evolutionary is just way too powerful for our heroes to try to fight against. And so they decide it should be Hercules. Now, the reason why, because Hercules is already a god. And so him evolving into possibly another power level of a god could be able to take down the High Evolutionary. Now, you do have the Hulk wanting to go first, but he's actually sent away by the High Evolutionary. And then you have Steve Rogers go out of his way to distract the High Evolutionary long enough to allow Beast to work on Hercules, putting Hercules inside the actual genetic device. Now, once you have Hercules walk out of the device, he's on a whole new power level. But here's the thing, the High Evolutionary is still a very powerful character. But the problem is, he tries to use too much power to fight against Hercules. And the reason why I say he's trying to use too much power is because Hercules is still evolving, even though he's now outside of the actual device. And so Hercules is only getting stronger and stronger to the point where the High Evolutionary can't really do much against Hercules. Now, when it comes to the High Evolutionary, because he does use a huge amount of his energy, he just disappears. It seems like his body and his armor just couldn't keep up with the energy that he was trying to use. And so he just flat out breaks apart and disappears. And we're left to wonder what happened to the High Evolutionary. Now, when it comes to Hercules, he's still evolving. And he keeps evolving to the point where he also disappears just like that. So both characters are officially gone. The day is saved, but at the same time, the Avengers had just lost one of their own. Now, here's the thing. The Avengers, they have to leave the base right at this moment because you still have the members of the army of the High Evolutionary trying to carry out his mission. And so once you have the heroes defuse the bomb, but to also make sure the actual ship crashes so that no one is able to continue on with the High Evolutionary's plan, our heroes are able to leave. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.